In your personal experience, how do you think the news media covers stories about Native Americans?
They only cover the bad parts or what happens on an Indian country. Just recently, this whole focus on tribal tags in Oklahoma, it's driving a huge rift between the state and Native nations in Oklahoma. There was a kind of a misleading article printed about a person going outside of their jurisdiction with their tribal vehicle tag, getting ticketed, for not being in the jurisdiction. Now it's out there, and now the state knows that Native tribes want these rights, and they're fighting Native sovereignty and using the news media to combat sovereignty. They try to spin it in a way that seems counterproductive to Native relations within the state of Oklahoma. When they have the opportunity to focus on a negative news story, that's all that they can focus on. And so it really doesn't help our relationship between the state and the nation.
What do you think about newsrooms that do not have anchors or reporters to cover Native American issues and just assign those stories at random?
I think that you have a huge underrepresentation within the media. And just because a person identifies as American Indian, are they connected with their community, and do they really know what's going on as it pertains to the issues affecting Indian country? A lot of times people say, oh, well, we hired a Native person in our newsroom. Well, that could be anybody that identifies as, an American Indian, but is that person culturally competent? Do they have a connection to their community or their identity that they can bring to the newsrooms? It's really about finding the right people, because you can't just assume that one Native person can speak for all Native people. One person, even me as a former tribal liaison for the University of Oklahoma, I know that I don't speak for all tribal nations, and because every nation has its own issue, and so it's different for Native people depending on where they come from.
How do you think non Indigenous people are influenced by the news media surrounding their coverage of Native Americans?
So I think they're swayed. They have this misrepresentation of who Indian people are. They think that some people, it depends on where they're going to school or where they're educated from. They don't see a whole lot of Native people, so in the media, they only see it's on TV, a portrayal of feathers and people running around on horseback and living in a teepee. And that's not who all Indian people are. We are contemporary people. So there are issues that need to be discussed that affects the overall larger Native community in terms of, we've always been combating that racism, mascots. Now we're focused on protecting our sovereignty, uh, protecting the land, maintaining our identity. These are all important issues, but really all they see is that imagery on the media, right? And what that is. So a lot of people will say, well, there are no longer Indians here because they don't see them every day. And they're portrayed as, I guess, the 18th and early 19th century. That's the only time you see Native people is when, they're in the Western movies. You don't see a whole lot of movies about Native people in a contemporary time frame.
What would you like to see change in major media news outlets to properly represent Native Americans?
I think focus on real stories that are impacting Native communities. We still have missing and murdered Indigenous women and men that are missing from these communities. And I think we have to also tell the land, talk about land, and talk about what the Native people's rights are to their sovereignty.